Good day. Today, we have collected all of the facts and data currently known about our suspect known as John Freedom and put it into a video to display to you all here at the Los Santos Police Department. This video is for police training and investigative purposes. The beginning. As far as we understand, John Freedom has been around since July 4th, 1776, when he floated down from the clouds and created the United States of America as a country. He became close friends with all of the other founding fathers and fought in the Revolutionary War. He reportedly crossed the icy Delaware River with George Washington, but he actually swam across the freezing river instead of using a boat. With the help of his freedom blast, the colonists won against the British, whom were threatening to use nuclear weapons on the 13 colonies before this. We suspect this was how he first found out about nuclear technology. Shortly after the war, we know that King George III was personally evaporated by his freedom blast. Strangely, we also have reports that he was around when the Boston Tea Party occurred, years before he came from the clouds, but no photographs of him were taken at the scene. Following this, he retired into a quiet countryside suburban life and watched in anger as the two-party system was created and American national unity was at an all-time low. This changed after the War of 1812, however, to John Freedom's excitement. During the Battle of New Orleans, John Freedom and General Andrew Jackson successfully kicked the British off the continent once again and secured a bright future for America. Thinking about the future ahead, it was around this time that John Freedom began to think about starting a YouTube career. It was also around this time that he invented fireworks, the hamburger, McDonald's, and the American bald eagle. We also figured out in these early time periods that John Freedom is not a normal human being like the rest of us. He doesn't eat food or drink water. Rather, he guzzles fuel and gasoline to survive and sometimes eats batteries. The period of war. When the Civil War came along, John Freedom went about a very brutal beheading process against Confederate traitors who he deemed as Soviet scum. As the Civil War was going on, John Freedom was at a loss of words when the government of the United States began talking about France as if it was a real place or a real country. According to bystanders, he looked very disappointed, sad, and angry. He lived as a cowboy in the American West for a time, killed many more people, and then returned to the United States military during the Spanish-American War, World War I, and World War II. When Pearl Harbor was attacked, he somehow was actually in Hawaii and decimated the entire attack squadron with his freedom blast. The USS Arizona and other ships did sink, but none of the Japanese aircraft made it back to their carriers. During his military years, he murdered countless numbers of people with his devastating freedom blast, which seemed to be growing more and more powerful each time he used it. He recorded the flag being raised on Iwo Jima. He was in the 101st Airborne Division when it was surrounded at Bastogne, and he even led a group of Americans, Egyptians, Ethiopians, and Scottish up the beaches of Normandy. He battled with the infamous Freddy Fascism and banished him to another unknown dimension, and also personally evaporated Adolf Hitler with a freedom blast. It's around this time that when there would be a major turning point in the life of John Freedom. He figured out for the first time in his basement in the Midwestern United States how to construct a nuclear weapon. He made two, and in August of 1945 he dropped two nuclear weapons on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, forcing the Japanese to sue for peace. The Cold War. When John Freedom figured out that communism existed, it nearly ended his life. He had a heart attack and was rushed to the hospital, but was saved by professional and skilled doctors. He told them, "Thanks," and then ran out of the building. This incident would later be called the Red Scare. John Freedom was sighted sprinting towards the line that separated West and East Germany, attempting to lead a charge of US soldiers into the Soviet Union, but was stopped by US military police. Across the fence, he saw what made his heart sink into his chest. Charles Communism. A blonde-haired, middle-aged man with a beard, a Soviet flag hoodie, and hammer and sickle-loving eyes. Smiling as he was taken away to military custody, he broke out of this custody and rushed home to construct more nuclear weapons to use them on the Soviets. When he got back, he found out his home had been raided by the CIA and all of his blueprints on how to construct a nuclear bomb had been stolen. He stormed into the CIA building in a demand for answers, And this is the point where we believe he was somehow recruited into the CIA and became a federal agent completely and utterly loyal to the federal government. Because after this point, he had no problem with the fact that they had taken all of his money, his wife, and his nuclear blueprints. John Freedom was held back from the Vietnam War as the government didn't want to see him get lost in action. They had bigger plans for him. In the late 1960s, John Freedom was strapped to a US rocket and sent into outer space. He successfully became the first human being to land on the moon, and he planted about 92 American flags on the lunar surface. Leading up to now, in the 1980s, not only did John Freedom discover that there was good music that wasn't military marches, but he also discovered the location of Charles Communism's house. He made an attempted raid on it, but Charles Communism detected the democracy approaching on his capitalist radar and fled before John Freedom could strike. Just then, Soviet planes roared out of the sky and attacked him. John Freedom, however, decimated the entire attack squadron with his Freedom Blast. When Charles Communism arrived back at his house, thinking John Freedom would have left by now, he and Freedom had a duel beyond anything the world had ever seen before. Lightning crashing into the hills, energy being fired at an almost extraterrestrial rate, explosions, and the sweat of ideologies coating the fields. Charles Communism, after hours of fighting and to the dismay of Mr. Freedom, somehow managed to escape the battle, but badly injured. Immediately after this, John Freedom was involved in the Iran-Contra affair, and the CIA installed coups throughout the world. John Freedom himself personally dismantled the Soviet Union after infiltrating Moscow in 1991, dismantled terrorism in a grueling desert campaign following 9/11, and then went on to create a YouTube channel in the early 2000s. John Freedom started with videos largely normal in nature, Sea of Thieves gameplay, Minecraft, etc. But as time wore on, his videos would become more and more violently patriotic as he no longer felt the need to hide his immense patriotism from the masses. The masses, in return, began to throw their mass support behind John Freedom, propping him up to over 1,000 subscribers. Thousands had called for John Freedom to become president, something he hadn't considered when he created the country because he thought it would be undemocratic to make the creator the leader. He now, though, considers the prospect greatly and has already launched his campaign for president by advertising across the platforms of the internet. As of recent, we have found out most dangerous news about this individual that has brought the matter of this strange man to our attention. The disappearances of many individuals in and around the area of wherever John Freedom is residing can be directly linked back to him via sloppy cover-ups and fingerprints. We arrested him once for this, but he broke out of custody, claiming that he has to eradicate more communists. The victims who have gone missing, in some cases, have had little to no connection with socialism or the Communist Party, which leads us to believe that John Freedom might be mentally delusional. Nonetheless, he is a very dangerous threat and has to be sedated and put in maximum security at Alcatraz if we catch him. We asked the CIA if he's still an agent with them, but we've gotten no response yet. In other recent news, John Freedom's YouTube channel unexpectedly grew 13 times the size of what it previously was, thanks to a spotlight from the YouTuber named Jay Schlatt, another criminal on our watch list, and a man we've been hunting down ever since the incident he was involved in years ago. This concludes our known information about John Freedom, but if you know anything else, please send it to us so you can help us with our investigation. Thank you.